today we have Samba Koita from Microsoft and Brad Palm from Ascent. They will be our main presenters today and having a great dialogue about MDR. Let me just share the deck here to get us started. So Samba is a Senior Technical Business Development Manager with Microsoft located in France. And Brad is the Director of Product Research at Ascent located in the United States. We'll begin today with what is a modern SOC. Samba will take us through the Microsoft tooling and review the rapid modernization plan. And then thereafter, Brad will take us through the people process technology, the Ascent SOC model, cell model with you today. And with that, I would love it if you guys, everyone could adhere to the Microsoft Digital Code of Conduct that's also in the window. And I will turn it over to Samba to get us started.
All right. Thank you, Paulette. Good morning. Glad to be here. So I wanted to start the presentation with some of the observation, and I'm sure we will all agree on that. Basically, the threats are increasing volume and sophistications, and it's getting also more and more easier for attackers to launch some of their attacks. You can now buy ransomware as a services. You can even get for a couple of $100 phishing, etc. And if you click next, the next point is also today. Of course, we cannot stop all the attacks, and as a collectively, I think we've all came to that conclusion several years ago, and not only putting all our eggs on protecting only, but more and more leveraging detection and response capabilities. And this is also fully aligned with the assume breach mentality that we are all talking about now with the zero trust. So having a balance between the investment on the cross protection, but also heavily investing in detection and response capabilities. We're seeing now everybody talking about EDR and now XDR, and even I've heard next generation XDR. So it's really now not only about preventing, because we all know that we cannot prevent 100% of all the attacks. And the next point here is that also if you decide to choose, security capabilities from different vendors, one from the email side, another one for the endpoint, another one for the identity, it then bring some of the integration complexities, and the complexity also comes with high cost of implementation. So threat detection requires also context and from the diverse source that you may have. So initially, and I personally was working for a SIEM vendor before, it was, just bring all the alerts and the possible data source that you may have. And then after that, you will figure out by creating correlation rules. But soon enough, we all arrived to the conclusion that this was not the best effective way to do it. And of course, the next point around these observations is that now we need to rely on human, of course, but also more and more on automation capabilities. And also as a company with the size of Microsoft, we are heavily also relying on automation. And this really will give time and more resources for the security analysts, being tier 2 or 3, to maybe more work on more complex incidents instead of working on a repetitive task. So by having an increased number of data sources and log, and if you click next, we then will arrive to this concept of data gravity, which basically means that analytics will gravitate around the larger mass of data. So the data will have a pool of power that will attract other apps and services. And because the cost and latency of moving a large set of amount of data over the network is much more effective to leverage analytics that are really close to the data source versus trying to move a large set of data into existing analytics. And as an experience that we've also seen in the field is that with Office 365, for example, which has a very, let's say, large number of logs, if you try to get all those data, in your on-premises SIEM, for example, of course, you will face, bandwidth issues, but also storing and capabilities that can all be very, very costly. So it's really difficult to copy all the data needed in one place. And when I was preparing for this presentation, I also find it quite interesting, the formula behind how do we calculate the data gravity. So if you're a little bit, if you're interested in it, I can definitely share the slides. I'm not the creator of the data gravity, but I just find it very, very interesting. So for the different signals, most SOCs are, again, dealing with multiple data sets in different locations that can assist in alert generation. Microsoft is providing several set of APIs. So the first one was a security graph API, where you could get alerts from the different Microsoft security solutions in your SIEM and start working with them. And we also are adding, and these APIs are already available. So we are now talking about the streaming APIs, where you could get, in addition to the alerts, some of the logs that you may need to create your own correlation rules. But again, I tell this to all my customers and partners. We are not sure if it will be very effective to just to take the example of the EDR, for example, to take all the possible logs and then after the fact figure out what to do with those logs. So this is really the least effective way to do it. It's costly, and actually I'm not sure if you're gonna get any meaningful data out of it. Okay, so the security graph APIs will really help you, get all this data, but the different log will really reside on the expert systems. If I take the example of the EDR, and then, well, you will have the data present on the EDR, but you will just get the alerts. Okay, so if you click next again, very, very quickly here, some of the other observations is that sometimes we, as a defender, are really thinking in silos. Whereas attackers, they just traverse rapidly across the enterprise. Why in silos? This is referring to my previous point, is that if you have, a tool for email security, for example, and a tool managing the email security, and another one for the endpoint, another one, you may have a CASB, for example, you may have an identity type of solution that you install on your domain controllers. So if there is not really, connection between those two elements, and so then you are really chasing alerts and trying yourself, to figure out, okay, are all these alerts related in some way or not? And this also creates some mapping challenges because let's say an IP address from the email context are the formatting the same as the data that you could get, for example, for the endpoint. So silos really must be integrated to provide high quality alerts and correlation. And more, we are, pushing customers and partners to more use, an incident type of mindset instead of, chasing individual alerts. Okay, and so if we click next, yeah, we can just, yes. So in this view, it's how, internally the engineering team at Microsoft is working to, try to optimize your SOC analyst experience. So as you may already know, Microsoft has a solution for email, which is called Defender for Office, another one for the endpoint, which is Defender for Endpoint, for the CASB. And what we are really trying to do with our XDR approach is first, having some signal sharing around those different products. And this will really reduce the workload of the security analysts. And the example I like to take, it's, for example, if for some reason an email, a malicious email was delivered to the end user, and it was not blocked because, again, we cannot block 100% of all threats. But we discovered that after the fact, so in the email side, for example, there is a capability that is called Zap that will automatically remove the email from the user inbox to the junk mail. But because we'll have correlation between those different products, the email solution will automatically send a message to the endpoint saying, hey, there is probably a problem on this specific user's machine, so you may want to, do some of the investigation. So the first step is to have communication around all the entities and signal sharing, and then trying to have, if you click next, a entity definition, and in a way that an IP address for an email is an IP address when you're in the context of endpoint and if you're in the context of cloud. So really trying to unify the entity definition, and another step is also trying to have the same semantics and meaning. If you click next, you will see try at least to have the events, the alerts, the incidents, all the mapping being similar in those different capabilities. So now we have different products that are sharing data. We try to unify the entity definition. An IP address is an IP address, a domain name is a domain name, and then trying to have the same type of mapping when it comes to the event, to the alerts, and so that the security team can also write some queries and try to understand what is really the context around the alerts. And of course, on top of that, we will heavily rely on automation and ensure that automation run across all systems. Again, making sure that if we delete automatically an email, we do it for all the users that were impacted, and we will try to do is to do that automatically. And the last piece, and Microsoft did work really heavily to accomplish that, because in the previous year we had a specific portal for each of these products. So you will end up probably with 4 to 5 portals, and now we are really reducing the gap and having one unified portal where we will automatically for you do the correlation of alerts into incidents, and then this incident can be sent to a SAM solution like Microsoft Sentinel or another. And so if we click next here, we will rapidly get to some of the modernization plan. We frequently find that organizations start the SOC modernization journey with the expectation that they are simply adding cloud to the existing SOC process. But we learn along the way that the better approach is to use cloud and existing technologies to try to transform SOC processes while again protecting the cloud and on-premises. So as a part of our SOC modernization journey, we developed a plan in 4 areas. So the step 1 is streamlining all the common attacks. So having a single attack queue, being able to automatically process some of the alerts. The example that comes to my mind is, for example, in Office 365, you have the possibility to signal a suspicious email, being, for example, a phish or a spam, and for some reason, this message was not blacked. And by doing that, it can automatically trigger on automated investigation in Office 365, where I will try to do some clustering, finding all the emails that are similar. And if we know that these emails are indeed malicious, so we will delete them across all the other mailboxes. So the first step is really trying to use automated investigation. So the second one is really trying to reduce the SOC process. So from there, it's really focusing on improving the alert quality and also hunting for basic alerts. So here you will now start to creating your own hunting rules, and in order to get more, let's say, qualified alerts and quality alerts. And the step three, because most of us in their digital transformation journey, they will probably use some cloud integration. Some may use multi-cloud. And so in this modernization journey, using also specialized detections, I think about CSPM type of solution for getting the cloud security posture management. Also thinking about the cloud workload protection, and another solution that sorry, that has been acquired by Microsoft recently, which is CloudNox, that really helps getting the status of all the permissions that are assigned across multi-cloud, and making sure that we are really applying the principle of least privilege. And the last step is we are finally in the process of refining, in a position to refine our processes, as well as incorporating specialized functions like advanced hunting. If you're a little bit familiar with the Microsoft ecosystem, we'll use the same language, which is the KQL, the Custom Query language that you can leverage on Microsoft Sentinel, for example, for your queries, but that you can also use in the different Defender products. So lastly, our Microsoft approach from the security operations center perspective, if you click next, is really more about detecting, and we have billion of events per month. And so this is our experience by being one of the larger cloud service providers, but we also have several services like Xbox, Office 365. So we are having billion and billion of events per month. So we heavily rely on machine learning. And in fact, in Sentinel, you also have Juniper notebooks that you can use to really help you to get some meaningful alerts out of this ocean of data. So all about detecting and reducing also the number of false positives, which unfortunately you will probably find in all the solution. So I just wanted to pause here for a second. So Brad, I don't know if you also want to comment a little bit on this slide and take us moving forward.
Excellent. Thanks, Samba. Some fantastic content there. I didn't know if we wanted to at least just check the chat real quick for questions on any of the content that was presented. I thought Samba did a great job kind of laying the foundation and really explained the value proposition of why Microsoft's tech stack is so powerful from a SOC, MSSP, or MDR kind of standpoint. And that's kind of the objective of today is how do we do that with an MDR team? Are we looking good in the chats for the question side?
Yeah, nothing in the chat right now, but I did let attendees know if you'd like to come off mute, you're able to do that and have a discussion with our speakers. So anytime Excellent. You can raise your hand or just come off mute. Let's keep going, Brett.
Perfect. Okay. So I think this is a great time for us to kind of talk about our journey. I think this last slide here that Samba kind of presented here, I think this is this is the gold star that we're trying to achieve, or our North Star, I should say, for a lot of our SOC teams, which is, alert fatigue is real. Samba highlighted kind of this initial grab all the logs and bring them into, processing areas. We'll figure out the data lakes layer. We just need all the data first, and then we can go hunt, or then we can go detect, right? And I think that's been a very challenging thing for our industry to surpass and kind of move on to a different perspective. And we kind of saw some undertones of that, which is intel driven, threat informed, prioritizing alerts. And I think we'll jump into our journey here of how we started to solve this at Ascent. And I'm going to go to the next slide here for me. But we did this really from two perspectives. We secure our roughly 150 person, 200 person organization with our own SOC, right? So we have to build out a SOC that we feel is acceptable to secure our business. And Ascent does, consulting kind of across the landscape with a security focus. As a Microsoft partner that helps organizations kind of jumpstart their Microsoft transitions, whether it's from on-prem to cloud or different kind of initiatives there, jumping into security stacks. But we also use it as an MSSP. So we use it to secure our customers that have chosen to do some degree of outsourcing of security to us to perform for them, or they do some kind of hybrid model, right? Where we kind of come up with the terms and the SLAs of what they want to see and versus what they want us to cover down on for them. And we kind of talk to some strategies behind that. But as we sat down and started building out our ideal scenario, Ascent does have a very heavy military background in a lot of the leadership team and then also the practitioners within our SOC. And so we've mapped something that kind of comes from our backgrounds of running what we consider command operation centers in different combat environments. And our cell model is directly reflective of kind of how we run continuous security operations in the human world, right, in meat space. And our cell model is kind of four big buckets that we kind of look at. And so I'll kind of walk through how Ascent has solved the MDR, the MSSP problem. You know, we think we've solved it fairly well. We're always growing, right? If we're not being transparent and honest, like we're always on a security journey, right? It's never quite done. There's always some work to be doing. There's always a to-do list occurring. But what we feel is we've built the right foundation for us to be successful on that journey. So I'll kind of dive into that here. So we have an intel team, a dedicated intel team, and that's very important to us because we want to be intelligence driven and threat informed. It's very important. Samba highlighted this idea that there are alerts you should be chasing within the realm of possible alerts, right? And those alerts are mapped to your adversary. So we have a bit of a boiling the ocean problem when it comes to how do you defend everything 24/7. And the way that we defend everything 24/7 is it's like how do you eat the elephant? We have to take small bites of the elephant, and we have to prioritize the bites that we take so that that they're focusing us in the right direction. And we do that by mapping ourselves to a real world adversary that has shown the propensity to be attacking our industry sector, or our clients, right? And so being intel driven is a fantastic way to prioritize your defenses and not always face the boiling the ocean problem of grabbing all the logs, doing all the detections, and we have to do it now. So intel is very critical for us. We have our SIM core, which we also call our current operations team. And that is your classic SOC tasks, right? Working through triaging, escalating to incidents, and then working that in that cell. And then we also have our forward-leaning team, which we call our future ops or our SOAR team. So really carving out a dedicated team that's obsessed with what does the future look like for us? What can we develop to make our current team, our COPS team's day better? And how can we help that alert fatigue? How can we create high-value detections? So that's the SOAR team's process. And then our underpinning of all this is a unique approach that we think to the industry, which is we have an apprenticeship program where we get folks varying degrees and backgrounds, degrees in terms of experience, not degrees in terms of college degrees. We take across the spectrum and we get them into these cell models and we rotate them through to get on the job training. And they get to learn from those team leads and dedicated teams as they kind of expand the horizons in the security ecosystem of what a career path could look like and what the job looks like. So we don't stick somebody right away into a tier one with a bunch of tickets. We start shopping around and kind of cultivating that security culture that we want. So that underpinning is very key for us. And then lastly, we have folks from the esteemed Microsoft DART team that have been threat hunters throughout the Marine Corps, Air Force, cyber protection teams, just really, I would say, obsessed folks with the security ecosystem that kind of our cyber team 6, which is our security ninjas and superheroes. And they are there to support, mentor, instruct, train, and then really become our reinforcement, our surging perspective for really big breaches, really big instances where we kind of have to bring all that horsepower to bear onto an issue. So this is kind of our four big buckets that I'd like to at least kind of tee up here for our cell model. And we can jump to the next slide. And then I'd just like to overlay it real quickly to simplify kind of what those roles are. We kind of break it down into current ops, intel, future ops, and our adversary team. And really the reason why our cyber team 6 is kind of positioned as an adversary team is over time, as you kind of built out your experience, I think, in the industry, you just get used to doing both blue and red work. So offensive and defensive work. And you just kind of become good at thinking adversarially, but then also thinking about how do we translate that back to our defense, whether it's in prevention or detection roles. So that's really, as you kind of have matured in the ecosystem, have seen a bunch of different things, have hunted on the network, have hunted processes, EDR systems, have hunted, files, malicious malware, email incidents, you really can have a better understanding of kind of the attack paths. And we'll jump to the next one. So the thing after you kind of figured out your structure, and I've talked about, there's a tiered structure, there's also a specialist structure, like a team structure, and that's kind of what we're positioning here is some specialized teams. And oh, great question just popped up. I'll try and maybe I'll just pause real quick and address that one since I've thrown out a couple terms and sometimes they're overloaded. So I just saw in the chat that what's the difference between a SOC, MDR, and an MSSP? I love that question. Okay, so a security operations center really is just I would call it it's the brain center, it's the trust group that is focused on security operations in your organization, right? So your SOC, varying degrees of people, varying structures. We've talked about a fully staffed one like Ascent has. We would call that a fully sourced one. You can have an outsourced one, which is what some customers have done for us. We are their outsourced SOC for them, so they don't really want to grow it in their business. Maybe they don't want to care for the culture. Maybe they don't want to grow that team. Maybe they've tried to hire and it's been a really challenging experience. They just choose to outsource it, which is a great experience, if you find the right person to outsource to. And then some will do some version of those two in a hybrid structure. So a SOC could take a couple different forms, and it could look like many different teams. We've talked about tier teams, which is your level 1 analysts do kind of the big bucket, high volume alerts. You have a tier 2 that kind of gets triaged to, and then your tier 3, which is usually your more seasoned. That was a very familiar and kind of common tiered model previously. I would say that a lot of the modern SOC talks, blogs, videos are leaning more towards these cross-functional and specialized teams, which you have in front of you right now, this PowerPoint. This is kind of an example of a cross-functional team. So that's kind of the SOC grouping. And then if we look at what is MSSP, that would be a managed security services provider. And oftentimes that is managed SOC provider. So that kind of gets confusing. But really, you could do managed security services for anything. You could be doing it for your endpoints, your EDR platform. You could be doing it for your firewalls, emails. There's all kinds of things that you kind of carve out of security operations to give to a managed service provider to do. I'm finding that it's more common that MSSPs are kind of doing it all, right? They're offering it all to the customer because the customer, they don't want to be bothered with that specific problem of security operations. So they just outsource it. And your MSSP does that. I would say we have a hard time delineating between MSSP and MDR right now. Managed detection and response. We've seen as EDR has blown out and become such a big part of this problem, which is managing your endpoints and finding bad that occurs on them in a timely manner. You've seen a lot of different competitors come to the market, and it's great. The EDR does a lot to get you into high value alerts, but there's still care and feeding of the system, right? It's just not set it and forget it. So managed detection and response really comes in over top and does something above and beyond what is just the table stakes rollout of that EDR platform. So hopefully that addresses the question. At least that's how we're going to kind of frame it for this discussion. But again, it's overloaded terms. You'll kind of hear folks kind of dance around different parts of that. But I think that kind of hits that one.
Brad, there is one more question. How do we combat alert fatigue? That's a good one too, I think. I don't know if you have an answer for that, but
yeah, no, and that's one of my favorite questions. And I almost was going to address that on Samba's last slide, which is Microsoft's approach from their SOC. And you saw kind of this down sliding graph of detections to just what is really important to look at. I'm trying to think if I can slide it in here right now or if there's a better slide to do it with. And I'll address it right now since it popped up. So we have found the best way to address alert fatigue is one, to leverage really what Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is providing us in terms of it is streamlining from MDE a stream of alerts into our Sentinel instance that have already been curated by a team, a Microsoft product team that is focused on detection engineering, right? So I would say for the majority of small to medium businesses that are out there, when they deploy MDE, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, what they're buying is they're buying Microsoft's familiarity with the data sources, what those log sources look like, and then they've spent the time to craft what is a valuable detection out of that data source. And I think that is like the classic 80-20 rule, where that meets 80% of the market need, right? That MDE does. If you have higher needs or more refined needs, the beauty of it is you can take that goodness that MDE is providing you, and then you can go to town tuning it. And that's kind of what we do in our detection engineering branch. So if MDE in its current configuration is, generating alerts, and the majority are good and some are noisy, you then have to kind of take stock and say, well, why is this one noisy for our environment? Really understand what it's pulling that information off of, and then start to tune it. And that is the detection engineering kind of craft. It is, this rule exists for a reason. It may exist to alert us to, let's say, a credential stuffing attack by an adversary, and it's really noisy in our environment. Is there a better way to tune this such that the signal to noise ratio is better for us as analysts versus false positives? I will tell you, I have driven pretty much every SIM EDR platform out there. Every single one requires tuning, and at least, because every environment's unique. It would be silly to think that all of our businesses have the same kind of just flow of data and different data sources. So we do have to invest in tuning. And that's going back to that discussion of where does the MDR value proposition occur? It occurs because your MDR is really kind of owning that problem for you and really tuning it for that customer's needs and threat models. So the key to reducing alert fatigue is having somebody that is forward leaning, which is in our future ops cell on this slide, that is concerned about detection engineering and thinking about what are the important things we need to be going after, or what are the gaps that currently aren't covered and we need to start focusing on. So I'll pivot off of that, and we'll call that question hopefully addressed, and we'll kind of come back into this model. There's a lot going on here with diagrams, but the key thing that I want to talk about is we have cross-functional information flow and a support structure built into this. This inherently, this can't be a siloed model because of the communication flow that we've established. Intel is busy cranking out emerging threats to the adversary team so they can spin off and do some research this week. Intel is giving emerging threats, TTPs, and indicators of compromise to future ops, so they can maybe go run that against a lookup or a look back in a data set just to see if we missed something previously. And if we miss it, kind of start tuning some detections around it. At the same time, they're feeding it to the COP center because they're fighting the fight that day, and they need to be aware of what the threats are on the landscape that day, right? So that's just one small example of one team influencing the other three and really providing a service to the other three. It's mutually supporting. And so we have these bi-directional flows of how these teams support each other, and kind of just hammering that point of this cross-functional specialized team construct by its nature cannot be siloed. And you really kind of get this supportive team feel across it. It works great for our culture because they know they can pick up the phone if they're having a hard time and reach out to somebody on a specific thing. And I'll give an example of that. So current ops, the SOC team is sitting there and they're fighting something. They're saying, this looks like process hollowing, right, on this endpoint. And I'm having a really hard time of thinking through the attack. I've never done a process hollowing attack before. I'm going to go reach out to my adversary team. I'm going to steal 30 minutes of their time. I'm going to have them sit down and talk to me about, what tools do you use for process hollowing? What does it look like? And then they're going to sit there and just kind of illuminate this trouble ticket that this analyst was spinning their wheels on, and just kind of like, help that triaging process and whether it needs to be escalated or closed out. So this is a really popular model for us. It's worked in the past for us in the military, and we feel like it works really well for our team. I'll have you jump to the next slide here. So we did people and process on that last slide, and then I'm just trying to overlay briefly about how we leverage the Microsoft stack. And I just got a warning about my battery, and I'm plugged in. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. So let me try and adjust that real quick. Right.
And so I just wanted also to comment really quickly on the threat intelligence space, because this is something that most of our customers and partners were asking, saying basically that Microsoft, you have, this threat intel, your security intelligence graph, but you may not be sharing that with us. Or if we don't have Microsoft security product, how do we really can benefit from all the threat intelligence that you have? So to answer to that question, Microsoft acquired a company that is called RiskIQ, which is really specialized in all things related to threat intelligence, and a not so new product category that is called ESAM. so which stands for External Attack Surface Management. So for the threat intelligence piece, we will have a native integration with Microsoft Sentinel, and that will really definitely help when you're doing your investigation. And by leveraging the playbooks, we could automatically ask what is the latest data that RiskQQ has on a specific IP address or a domain name, and then automatically put a comment on that. So I think this can be a solution that can be interesting for you as well. Over to you, Brad.
All right, you saw me do the classic swap there. Got a battery charger on, lost the camera, but that's all right. We keep on rolling here. We're good with audibles. Thank you very much for that, Samba. That was perfectly timed. So what we have here is a technology kind of overlay on top of our people and process view. And I want to highlight just within kind of the current ops team that I've been talking about, which houses the SOC. We're working in Sentinel as that single pane that Samba was talking about, that single analyst experience, right? And Sentinel has the hooks into the rest of the ecosystem. And I'll tell you, since I'm on the R&D side of the house, the product research and development, we think very hard about tech debt. And Samba kind of teed up this topic of, if you're chasing best of breed, and let's say we're taking a product vendor from here and a product vendor from here and a product vendor from here, we have essentially increased our complexity as a development and supporting team, right? We have to worry about all these integrations, what APIs talk, and they never do it fully out of the box like you want them to. And then how do we manage this as things shift across all these 5 vendors? And chasing best of breed, I've been exposed to it, been part of it, and it's a very challenging process. And I will tell you that as we were building out our SOC, it was refreshing to see what Microsoft provided us. And we really kind of came to this idea of a SORganic approach, right? So it's kind of a play on words of SOAR, which is security, orchestration, automation, response, and GANic, which is like, classic living off the land, kind of playing on what's a popular theme. Within the attacker ecosystem, it's called LOL bins, living off the land binaries. And here as defenders, we're trying to kind of harness a little bit of that cheeky humor and say, we're living off the Microsoft ecosystem because it's providing the sustenance that we need to run an effective security program. So we call it SORganic where we are. And in that gray box on the outside of our current ops team is an example of how we leverage SORganic from the Microsoft ecosystem. We're using Sentinel for our daily operations. We're using logic apps for automation, enrichment, and contextualization of alerts. We're using workbooks. When we do pivots to hunts and we're looking at data sources that are larger and require maybe some statistical modeling, we're using Jupyter notebooks within the Sentinel ecosystem, right? And then classic, leaning heavily on MDE as our MDR platform. And again, we hit APIs across all the back end of these things. Samba talked about, the security graph APIs is one of them, but we're really leaning into being API first as we build out these function calls and enrichments, right? Because that gives us resiliency and that gives us the ability to swap communication between different data sources. So I think we're around for questions, but I really appreciate your time, Samba, and I think that was a great way to tee up what is a heavy conversation, right? There's a lot going on in security operations. It's a lot to consume in just a little bit, but hopefully that at least starts to, bring up the idea of how would you operationalize this purely off the Microsoft stack. And we feel very comfortable with where we're at and how we can provide protection to our customers with it. So I hope that helped.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a great pleasure to be with you today. And yeah, hopefully we will talk soon again. Thanks to all our attendees and thank you all.